On a very quiet late night, I sat in meditation alone in a familiar room. No lights, no sound, no effort, just sitting and letting everything in my mind settle as darkness enveloped everything. My eyes were closed, no light, no colors, no physical images present. Yet, amidst that silence, something strange began to happen. I could still see. A face appeared, then a memory, then an old road. Everything emerged clearly, just like a dream seen with open eyes. But the strange thing was, I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't consciously recalling it. The images came on their own, and I simply observed. At that moment, a question arose from deep within. What is seeing all of this? It wasn't my eyes, for they were closed. It wasn't light. It wasn't imagination, for I wasn't trying to do anything. So where did this seeing come from? A seeing that needed no light, was not bound by space or time. It was not an illusion, nor was it mere imagination, but living proof that there is an awareness, always present, even when all physical senses have ceased. This story is my own experience. One night of meditation revealed a vision beyond the senses, and that became the starting point of a journey to look deeply into what is seeing. If you have ever had such a moment, closing your eyes yet still seeing something, perhaps you will understand me. But do not be quick to name it as mind or intuition or anything at all. For the moment we rush to define it, we fall back into intellect. So walk with me to the end of this reflection, not to understand more, but to touch that knowing which has never left us, not even for a second. We assume that seeing is a function of the eyes, and that the eyes are the source of perception. But in truth, the eyes see nothing at all. They are merely like camera lenses, receiving light, colors, shapes, and transmitting that signal to the nervous system for processing. If the eyes are damaged, the signal is cut, but if the brain is inactive, then no matter how perfect the eyes are, we still see nothing. This proves that the eyes are just a gateway, not the true source of seeing. Real seeing does not reside in the retina, nor in the optic nerves. These organs are merely intermediaries, tools for something deeper to operate, to perceive. Think back to the dreams you have had. In a dream, you still see people, places, movement, emotions. You may be floating in the sky or standing in a distant forest you have never been to. You even know exactly where you are and who you are speaking with. And yet, your eyes remain closed. Every physical sense is inactive. So who is seeing that dream? What is perceiving the images, emotions, and sounds while the body lies completely still? Similarly, you might be sitting quietly, eyes closed, remembering a loved one who has passed away. Their image appears clearly. You see them smiling. You even hear their familiar voice in your mind. No one but you knows what you are seeing. Because this entire experience does not happen through the eyes, but in an inner space, one that science has yet to measure with instruments. No physical sense is involved in these experiences, yet you still see, still perceive, still know. This leads to a conclusion. There is an awareness that transcends physical senses. And this awareness does not come from the eyes, but from somewhere deeper. Deeper than the eyes, deeper than the brain, deeper than even thoughts. That is why, if you believe the eyes are the source of seeing, you have missed the entire depth of perception. The eyes may be blind, but the inner seeing continues to function. The eyes may be closed, yet the mind still perceives a world far greater than the physical one. This seeing does not need light, is not obstructed by eyelids, and does not depend on external objects. It is the foundation of every experience, whether it be dreams, imagination, memory, or the present moment. And if you begin to question its true nature, you are taking the first steps on a journey to discover your own mind. When you explore the mind as seeing, the first thing to clarify is that the mind is not the stream of thoughts running through your head. Thoughts are merely one of countless phenomena that arise and disappear within the mind, like waves rising and falling on the surface of a lake. The mind, however, is the lake itself. Still, vast, the space where all movements take place. The mind is not the brain. The brain is merely a biological organ like the heart or lungs. It processes information, stores memory, and coordinates functions. But the brain cannot be aware of its own existence. The mind, on the other hand, knows the functioning of the body, the brain, and the thoughts passing through. The mind is also not simply ordinary consciousness. Consciousness is the state of knowing when we are awake, aware of what we are doing and feeling. But consciousness can shut down when we enter deep, dreamless sleep or undergo anesthesia. The mind, however, never shuts down, because the moment you wake up, awareness instantly reappears. No one turns it on, no one presses a button. That knowing has always been there, only temporarily veiled by the interruption of brain activity and language. Many people believe that the mind is personal consciousness, the sense of I know, I think, I observe. But what we call consciousness is, in fact, just a conditioned process shaped by experience, memory, and identity. It flows with a personal color tied to ego and social roles. It reacts, differentiates, and constantly creates the feeling of a self standing behind perception. The mind, however, is different. The mind is knowing without personal identity. It is not bound to names, memories, or roles. When there is no longer the concept of I know, but only pure knowing, without distinction, without labels, that is the mind. It is not, I am seeing this, but rather, seeing is happening without a seer. It is complete presence, without subject or object, a natural radiance, like sunlight that does not choose where to shine. There is a strange truth that few notice. You can recognize that you are thinking. You can know that you are anxious, recalling the past, or imagining the future. Clearly, beyond thoughts, there is something observing those thoughts. And that something is not a thought. That is the mind. The mind does not try to see, yet it always sees. It does not try to hear, yet it always knows. It has no form, no color, yet it is the foundation upon which all other phenomena appear. When you close your eyes and imagine a scene, a face, a dream, those things arise within a certain space. That space is not in the physical world. It is not in the air. It is within the mind. So to be precise, the mind is not seeing in the sense of a subject looking at an object. The mind is a knowing that is complete, undivided between subject and object. The mind is not separate from the world. The mind contains the world. When you realize this, you will see that true seeing does not require eyes, does not require scenery, does not require distinction. The mind is the fundamental capacity through which all phenomena are known, seen, and felt. All senses, all streams of consciousness, all emotions, thoughts, they are merely waves rising on the surface of the mind's lake. And that knowing is the only thing that does not change, does not get replaced, does not get wounded by time or circumstances. If you can look at the knowing itself, rather than just at what is known, you are very close to awakening. Because at that moment, you are no longer caught in images, sounds, and thoughts, but are returning to the pure knowing, formless yet ever-present, the true mind. If you only stop at recognizing that the eyes are not the source of seeing, and that the mind is the deeper seeing, that realization can still easily become abstract. Because in daily life, we still look, still hear, still feel, and still react as if everything is real, private, personal. So how do we know whether we are seeing with the mind or merely seeing through the eyes and ego? Imagine a simple situation. You walk into a room and see someone sitting there in silence. If you see that person and immediately think, they look sad, maybe something is wrong, or this person doesn't like me, then you are not truly seeing them. You are seeing through memory, through emotion, through layers of past concepts. It is a sight that has been filtered through the self, no longer pure. On the other hand, if you see without adding any interpretation, simply seeing that the person is sitting there present, then that seeing becomes whole. There is no you, no them, no story interfering. There is only life, fully present and clearly known. That is when the mind sees. The mind seeing is not an intentional act. It is not about trying to see correctly or observe deeply. The mind seeing happens when there is no effort at all. When you are no longer the one analyzing, judging, controlling, then true seeing naturally illuminates itself. It is a state of wakefulness so simple that no one notices it. But because of that, it is profoundly deep. When someone praises you and you feel happiness, pause for a moment. Who is happy? Is it the mind, or is it an idea of me that has just been reinforced? And when someone criticizes you, do you feel discomfort, a reaction rising within? In that moment, if you simply see the reaction without identifying with it, then you are seeing with the mind. But if you get swept up in the emotion, wanting to defend yourself, wanting to change the other person, then that seeing is still the movement of the ego. Seeing with the mind does not mean becoming numb or indifferent. On the contrary, it is a deeper aliveness where you feel everything clearly but are not drowned in it. You may see sadness arising, but you are not the sadness. You may see anger appearing, but you are not the one who is angry. The mind is simply the knowing. This is sadness, this is anger, this is a thought. It does not judge, does not react, does not seek to interfere. It just knows. And in that state, you begin to realize something profound, that for most of your life, you have been looking but not truly seeing. Because that seeing is tainted by habits, past experiences, personal needs, and the fear of being hurt. It is no longer the pure seeing of the mind, but a version manipulated by layers upon layers of the ego. Seeing with the mind is seeing as if for the first time. No past, no repetition, no conclusion. And when such seeing is present, everything suddenly becomes light, whether it is anger, sadness, or pain. Because the mind does not resist anything, the mind simply sees, and in that seeing, all resistance dissolves. If you truly wish to live with deep awareness, do not try to change the world. Do not try to use thoughts or force yourself to meditate better. Simply observe. What are you seeing with? When the answer is no longer the eyes, no longer memory, no longer the self that knows, then you have begun to see with the mind, and from there, everything becomes clear, as it truly is. When seeing turns into illusion, the problem begins when the ego intervenes. In the moment that seeing arises, the ego immediately takes hold of it, attaching a someone who is seeing, a me who is looking, analyzing, and understanding. And from there, pure seeing becomes a tool of the ego. We do not just look, we attach a story to what we see. I see this, so it must mean that. I understand this person because I know their type. Seeing is no longer a simple contact with reality. It becomes a foundation for the ego to project meaning, reinforce itself, and assert its position in the world. And that is where seeing begins to be hijacked. Instead of seeing with awareness, we see with fear. Instead of seeing with presence, we see with defensive habits. A stranger's glance can be mistaken for contempt. A casual remark can be interpreted as an attack. A minor action from another can be inflated into a threat. Not because the world is distorted, but because our seeing has been distorted by the ego's endless need for self-protection. The ego does not just distort seeing, it uses seeing as a tool to manipulate emotions. It makes you think you are seeing the truth, when in reality, you are only seeing yourself through the lens of expectations, wounds, and unresolved memories. You believe you are awake, but in truth, you are living in a dream made of past experiences and reflexes. Therefore, what is truly frightening is not a wrong way of seeing, but seeing that has been hijacked by the ego. When that happens, seeing always serves to reinforce the sense of, I am the center, I am the knower, I am the one who is right. And anything that contradicts this image is rejected, resisted, or denied. This is the deep reason why many people, despite being knowledgeable and experienced, still live trapped in cycles of suffering. They cannot see reality as it is, because their seeing is always covered by the need to affirm themselves. They do not look at others as living beings, but as mirrors reflecting the image they want to believe about themselves. True seeing is not about what I see, but about whether I am still in it. If there is still a me standing behind the seeing, then everything seen is merely a form of perception hijacked by the self. It does not free you, it only reinforces the barrier between you and the world. But if one day you look and there is no longer a looker, only seeing happening by itself, then the ego has no place to dwell. It cannot latch onto anything to interpret, judge, or sustain itself. Seeing becomes pure, untouched by time, unmarked by the past. And from that seeing, you begin to live, without repeating yourself in every experience. Transcending this hijacking is not about fighting the ego, but about no longer being controlled by it. You do not need to destroy the ego. You only need to see that you are not it. And to see in this way is to see with the mind. A seeing that is not possessed by the ego. A seeing that does not need to affirm anything. A seeing in which you are no longer the center of any story, yet you are the foundation for all stories to arise and dissolve. Therefore, returning to the mind is not an intellectual journey. It is not about learning something new, memorizing lofty concepts, or believing in a particular spiritual system. On the contrary, returning to the mind is an act of stopping. Stopping the chase after images, stopping the clinging to emotions, stopping the endless flow of thoughts. In that stopping, a space opens up, a space where knowing arises without needing any object to hold on to. You do not need to search for the mind, because at this very moment, as you listen to these words, the awareness that you are reading, that itself is the mind. It is not in the words, it is not in thoughts, but it is the silent foundation that knows each passing word, that observes each arising inner reaction. You cannot see the mind as an object, but if you remain still long enough, you will directly realize that everything is unfolding within it. The mind does not come from outside, nor does it disappear when you are distracted. It remains like a clear mirror, reflecting every image without being attached to any. When the mind clings to images, it becomes what we call form, intellect, consciousness. But when it no longer clings to anything, it returns to its original state, pure, clear, and silent. In that state, you are no longer the one who looks, but rather seeing itself is naturally unfolding, without a subject, without an object, without interference. People often think seeing oneself means understanding one's personality, preferences, strengths, and weaknesses. But that is just the psychological surface, a small and ever-changing part. To truly see oneself is to recognize that which sees all of that which is not bound by names, memories, or identity. And when you see the seeing itself, when you become aware of the mind, you will realize that you are not what you think you are. You are not the stories in your head, not fleeting emotions, not the image you uphold before society. You are that which sees all of these arising and fading. You are the foundation from which every experience is born and into which it dissolves. No one can give you this realization. No knowledge can substitute for this experience. No religion can claim exclusive ownership of it. Only when you directly return, observe, remain silent, and recognize, only then do you truly meet yourself. Like a person drinking water, only they know whether it is hot or cold. No one can see the mind for you. But when you see it for yourself, you will know that every previous question, who am I? What is the mind? Where is enlightenment? All vanish like mist before the morning sun. At some point, you realize that seeing is not merely a cognitive function, but the very foundation of life itself. Not the seeing that knows objects, but the seeing that is living, that is operating in every moment you call, I am alive. And that is the greatest shift, from understanding seeing to living as seeing. As long as you're still thinking about seeing, still contemplating, still analyzing, you remain on the periphery of it. But when you live in the seeing, without carrying a teacher, without holding on to what is seen, life becomes as light as a cloud. You no longer feel compelled to clarify everything, no longer need to chase after answers for every question in your mind. Because the very awareness itself is the answer. At that moment, things are no longer objects for you to observe, but a part of the same movement as seeing itself. You no longer see a flower as an object, but feel the life bursting forth within it, inseparable from yourself. There is no me and flower, only the meeting of two presences, nameless, boundless. When a bird sings, you do not need to name it or determine where it is. The wordless knowing is already complete. When a wave of sadness arises, you do not need to push it away or unravel it. Just see that it is there, and immediately it is no longer my sadness, but simply a phenomenon passing through seeing. And then it leaves, like a cloud drifting across the sky, leaving no trace. To live this way is to live without being held. You can still converse, work, love, create, but there is no longer a sense of playing a role, of maintaining an image, of controlling the outcome. Every action unfolds naturally, not from fear of lack, nor from a longing to be affirmed, but from a place of clarity. In this state, you no longer seek anything from life, not because you have become indifferent, but because you are living at the very source of every answer. There is nothing to grasp, nothing to defend, nothing to perfect. Everything simply is, and that is enough. This is not apathy or surrender, but the highest form of aliveness. To live with everything, but not be bound by anything, like a drop of water merging into the ocean. It does not disappear, it becomes the whole. So too with you. When you are no longer the one who sees, but seeing itself, then you are no longer someone in this world, but life itself, recognizing itself through every gaze, every step, every breath. There is no secret. There is nothing to explain. Only one thing to realize. You have never left this seeing. You have never been anything other than this. In the end, after all the analysis, all the questions and experiences, what remains is not a concept of the mind, but the vibrant silence within you at this very moment. A presence that needs no explanation, a knowing that no longer demands to be named. In this state, the mind is no longer some distant, abstract idea, but the very living reality operating beneath every thought. The mind does not come from the past, nor is it found in the future. It reveals itself only in this present moment, not through effort, not through imagination, but through unconditional presence. If right now you are quietly sensing yourself, not trying to think or analyze anymore, then you are already in the mind. No validation is needed, no proof is required. Simply living in this knowing is enough. Do not let anyone convince you that the mind is something too complex, too lofty, reserved only for monks or special individuals. It belongs to no one. It is not possessed, not limited by identity or circumstance. Whoever you are, wherever you are, it is always here, an eternal foundation beneath all the movements of life. When you live from the mind, you no longer seek meaning in forms. You are no longer dependent on right and wrong, gain and loss, or the approval of others. You begin to see everything just as it is, without embellishment. And then, life is no longer a battle, but a gentle flow, where every moment holds a deep wisdom beyond words. Perhaps this is what I have always been silently reminding you, not to lead you towards something new, but to help you see what has never left. Not to add another layer of spiritual knowledge, but to show you that you already have everything. Not to make you believe something more, but to help you let go of what is untrue. Not to turn you into someone else, but to bring you back to the knowing within you that has never been apart. Thank you for listening this far. Thank you for being fully present with me. And if anything remains after all of this, it is you, in your purest form.